Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and get started. I can't see myself. Oh, here we go. Okay. So, good afternoon. My name is Lydia Edwards. I'm the chair of the Committee on Housing and Community Development. In accordance with Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, modifying certain requirements of the open meeting law and relieving public bodies of certain requirements, including the requirement that public bodies conduct meetings in a public place that is open and physically accessible, the City Council is conducting this hearing virtually. This enables the City Council to carry out its responsibilities while adhering to the public health recommendations and ensuring public access to its deliberations. The public may watch this meeting via live stream at www.boston.gov/city-council-tv or via broadcast on Xfinity 8, RCN 82, and BIOS 964. This public hearing is being recorded and live streamed on, again, the www.boston.gov. It will also be rebroadcast later. Anyone submitting written testimony can do so and can submit the testimony to Juan.Lopez at boston.gov. That's JUAN.LOPEZ@boston.gov. Today's hearing is on docket 0762, message and order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend the amount of $30,092,991.30 in the form of a grant of emergency rental assistance awarded by the U.S. Department of Treasury to be administered by the Department of Neighborhood Development. The grant will fund direct financial assistance, including rent, rental arrears, utilities and home energy costs and arrears, and other expenses related to housing. I am joined today by my colleagues, Councilors Ed Flynn and Councilor Michael Flaherty. I think that's it for right now. And also joined by many staff members from the Department of Neighborhood Development, including Tim Davis, Taylor Kane, Rick Wilson, Katie Ford, and I think that is also it from DND. So at this point, we've had many of, just for the public's education, we've had many hearings specifically about these kinds of grants. And what we often do is turn it over to the administration, who will then go through a deck or a PowerPoint slide to give us updates on the funding, where it's gone so far, what this proposed money will go to, and then we open it up for councilors for any questions. Before we go to the administration, I'm going to go ahead and allow Councilor Flynn and Councilor Flaherty, if they have any opening remarks, to feel free to say so now.
Thank you, Councilor Edwards. I just want to say thank you for your exceptional leadership on housing-related issues, especially during the pandemic. I also want to say thank you to Sheila Dillon's team at the Department of Neighborhood Development, working closely with so many residents in need throughout the city, helping them navigate the system. So I just want to acknowledge the exceptional work of the D&D team. I'm here to learn about the grant. I definitely support it. I'll be voting on it in support, but I just wanted to highlight and say thank you to my colleagues on the City Council, but also say thank you to my colleagues that work at D&D. Thank you, Councilor Edwards.
Thank you. Councilor Flaherty?
Thank you, Councilor Edwards, obviously, for hosting this urgent hearing while our lives are slowly returning to normal as more and more people are getting vaccinated and returning to work. There will be lasting impacts of COVID on our community. And the city's rental relief fund administered through D&D has been a godsend for many Bostonians throughout the whole pandemic, saving so many from evictions. But even for those who have been able to return to work, many still face back rent and other charges related to the pandemic. So continuing to fund this program will remain a priority of mine, as long as there are still those in need of assistance in order to protect every Bostonian's right to housing. I look forward to this hearing today in order to turn these funds around, get them released to the city as quickly as possible so they can be distributed to those in need. Thank you, Madam Chair, and look forward to listening to the testimonials.
Thank you. I'm now going to turn it over to the administration. I'm sure you have someone to lead us through the deck.
Thank you, Chairperson Edwards. For first thing, just a technical thing, we should admit Councilor Braden. And also,
Thank you.
I believe 154157 may be Taylor Kane. So why don't you admit them and see if that's in fact who that is.
Okay.
If it's not, you can blame me later. So,
After we get Zoom bombed.
okay.
I'm letting them both in. Is Nora Lutz with you by any
No,
chance?
Dora Lutz is not with us now.
Okay, all right, so Council Braden should be in shortly. Thank you for noticing that. Okay, good, all right. We should be all set. And Taylor, are you here with us?
Yes, that was me. Apologies.
Excellent, okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. Would you like Councilor Braden to say, give her an opportunity or?
You're doing my job.
I
Tim.
know.
Come on, I mean, we still have elections are up. You can join the team. Come on over to the other side. Come to us. Come on over. Yes, thank you, Councilor Braden. If you'd love to say anything, an intro, and then we're going to go to administration.
No, I'm not going to hold things up any longer. I really appreciate all the great work that has been done with regard to rent relief, and especially in the COVID crisis. And I'm eager to learn more and know that this support will need to be continued for some time going forward. So let's hear all about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Tim.
Okay, Chairperson Edwards and Councilors Flynn, Flaherty, and Braden, thank you for your opportunity to speak to you today about Boston's Rental Relief Fund. For the record, I am Tim Davis, Deputy Director for Policy Development and Research at the Department of Neighborhood Development. In early March, Congress passed the American Rescue Plan, or ARP, which provided for over $20 billion in emergency rental assistance, commonly known as ERA-2, to be distributed to states and localities. Boston was eligible for and has received $30,093,991.30 from the ERA-2 funds. This follows on the $20 million the city received previously, now known as ERA-1. These new funds have similar requirements to ERA-1 and that households who are eligible are those with incomes of less than 80% of area median income. As with ERA-1, funds may be used for rent and utilities due since March 13th, prospective rent, which is reviewed ongoing, utilities, including internet service. It can assist BHA tenants for their rent portion and utilities, and housing stability services. In a change from ERA-1, ERA-2 allows assistance for up to 18 months, which it had been 12 to 15 months previously. It has also eased some requirements around paying tenants directly and in income documentation in order to make it easier to help those in need. These funds will be used to further expand our rental relief fund. I'll now turn it over to Taylor Kane to provide an update on those funds. Thank you. And did we lose Taylor?
So I'm still here.
Oh, you're there. Okay. Wrong window.
I can go ahead and share my screen to go through a short deck that we put together. And for the record, my name is Taylor Kane. I'm the director of the Mayor's Housing Innovation Lab for the City of Boston. Great, so excited to be in front of the council again and share some updates around the distribution of the city's rental relief fund over the past several months. So what we'll go through over the course of this presentation is start with just high-level glance of what the rental relief fund has distributed to date and the modifications that we've made over the course of the past year. Then we'll take a bit of a deep dive into our rental relief fund expanded round, which is just a reference to the time period from March 2021 to today. And then we'll close out by sharing some information about how we're planning on programming some of the new resources with a particular focus on outreach and engagement. So just as a recap for folks, for the rental relief fund, the program eligibility, this fund is available to City of Boston residents who are households at risk of homelessness or housing instability and are at or below 80% of area median income. For our program, there is a preference for households who have been unemployed for 90 consecutive days or more, and for households that are at 50% of their median income or below. And in terms of the key programmatic features, households are able to receive up to $15,000 in rental assistance that can be used for past due, current, or future rent, as well as moving costs within the city of Boston, and utility assistance, for which we have a $1,500 max. So at a high level, since the city created the Rent Relief Fund in April of 2020, in those past 15 months, we've distributed over $15.5 million in rental assistance. This has gone to over 2,900 households across the city of Boston. We've distributed over $172,000 in utility assistance. And with these resources, we've also supported 294 tenant and landlord mediation sessions. And to the graphic on the side just gives a bit of a higher level recap around the number of households served, what we see in terms of the average amount of assistance that folks are receiving, around the $7,000 number, and that we've distributed assistance to every neighborhood in Boston. When we look at the funding over time, we thought it would just be helpful to share what we're seeing in terms of some of the changes in the average amount of unpaid rent, and how that corresponds to changes we've seen, specifically increases in the average award amount. So in April of 2020 to October of 2020, that time period, the average amount of unpaid rent that households applying to the fund had was around $3,500, and our award amounts were around $3,300. As we look forward to October 2020 to March 2021, we start to see a kind of a slow increase in the amount of unpaid rent that households have that corresponds with an increase in the average award amount. And in terms of where we are currently, the average amount of unpaid rent is around $5,000, and our average award amount at this moment in time is around $7,500, and this kind of tabulates into the full $15.5 million that's been distributed to date. So this slide has a lot of text on it, but was really just meant to recap some of the modifications that we've made to date to really streamline the application process for tenants and landlords and really respond to the need that we're seeing in different Boston neighborhoods. So there are 3 buckets that really capture the modifications that we've made to date. The first being the creation of a one-stop application process. So we have created an online application form where tenants and landlords can attach required materials to process those applications. We've ensured that all of our materials, applications, as well as flyers and outreach materials are available in 11 different languages. And we've also hired part-time program assistants to support tenants who need assistance completing applications via phone. We've also made a number of modifications that relate to eligibility, the award amount, and the types of assistance that are able to be covered by this fund. So we have recently updated our eligibility to allow for households with housing vouchers to be eligible for assistance. We've created a designated rental arrears program with the Boston Housing Authority, which we can share some more information on later in the presentation. We've increased our amount of assistance to up to $15,000 and have added eligible expenses around utility arrears, which include internet, electricity, and heating expenses. And then we recently hosted a training in the Environment Department for our partner agencies to get more information about how to really maximize the utility assistance payments. And then lastly, we've made several modifications that really are aimed to help tenants as well as landlords better coordinate. So we've implemented a direct-to-tenant payment process for situations where a landlord or property manager is unresponsive or refuses payment. We've made updates to our funding acceptance letter to include additional protections for tenants, such as a commitment for that landlord to participate in mediation sessions. And we've leveraged the support of our landlord mediator to work with tenants and landlords to come to mutually beneficial agreements. So this next part will just be a bit of a deeper dive into the applications that we've received from March of this year to today. So when we look at our rental relief fund expansion, what we've seen is over the past couple of months, we've received about 1,400 new applications. Around 300 of them have been deemed ineligible, and I'll share a bit about some of those reasons for ineligibility next. We have about 190 applications that are pending, and what that means is that they're either awaiting tenant or landlord documentation. And between March of this year to the end of June, we've distributed assistance to 854 households for a total of about 7.5 million in assistance. When we look at some of the common reasons for ineligibility, this has been pretty consistent over time, that we have about 35% of applicants who report being full-time college or graduate students, when we have about 28% of applicants who are identified as non-City of Boston residents. In both of these cases, once applicants are identified as ineligible, we share resources, specifically referring folks to the state's RAP and ERAP program for assistance. These next series of slides really dive into who we are serving with the rent relief fund assistance. So when we look at how applicants identify by race and ethnicity, we see that about 37% of our applicants identify as Black or African American, 26% identify as Latino, 15% white, 4% Asian, and then we have below other categories of racial identification. And what you can see here and what we'll continue to see throughout this data is that these funds are primarily being distributed to households of color across the city. We also added some additional detail about the gender identity of households receiving assistance. So what we're seeing currently is about 64% of our applicants identify as female. And so again, this really helps to start to tell a story of who is being served by the Rent Relief Fund. And then when we look at language access and language spoken at home, from our applications received over the course of the past few months, we have a little over 1,000 where households report that the primary language spoken at home is English, and 294 applicants who report that the primary language spoken at home is Spanish. And then in terms of neighborhood distribution, again, this slide will be familiar to many of the counselors on the call. But what we continue to see is that neighborhoods neighborhoods of Dorchester, East Boston, Roxbury, and Hyde Park and Mattapan continue to be the neighborhoods where we are seeing the largest percentage of applications and the largest amount of rental assistance being distributed. The kind of second tier of neighborhoods that we see applications and rental assistance going out to are Jamaica Plain, Brighton, South End, Roslindale, South Boston, and Fenway are in that category as well. And then finally, this kind of third tier of neighborhoods where we're seeing fewer applications come from. And this, when we go into the industries where households are reporting being involved in, this really matches closely. So we've also paid a lot of attention to the different pathways through which folks are hearing about the Rent Relief Fund. Over the past couple of months, what we've really started to see an increase in is that applicants are reporting that they're hearing about the fund from their property management company or landlord, being the largest bucket of source for where folks are hearing information about the fund. Friends and family is very close in terms of being a trusted outlet for information. City of Boston social media comes after that, and then nonprofit organizations or community groups. Apologies for that typo. And then we have the Office of Housing Stability being next, and then these other categories, a broader one of other that includes BPS and elected officials, where we have 157 applicants have heard about the fund through that channel, and then lastly through newspaper or radio. And then we've also started to try to understand where folks are completing applications and what types of technology folks are utilizing to complete the application. So most applicants are completing an application at home. And in the next slide, we'll see that primarily most folks are using a desktop or laptop computer to complete the application. But we also continue to see that there are folks who are reporting that they do not have internet access and completed an application via phone. there is a segment of folks that are utilizing connections with nonprofit, religious, or cultural centers to access the application and complete it, as well as public internet locations and public library branches. And then this is just what I was referencing in terms of the technology that applicants are using to apply. So primarily folks are using a desktop computer or laptop computer, but we also have folks who are completing via smartphone or mobile phone, as well as tablets, which include internet-enabled e-readers. And then this is, we just wanted to add a slide about the PHA rental arrears program, because this was a new addition to the rental relief fund over the past few months. So with this program, we have assisted 175 households who are residents of the Boston Housing Authority to date, and distributed around 800 and oh my goodness, words are so hard today, $8,900 in assistance through the PHA rental arrears program. And then lastly, this is the last section, as we think about future need and programming the additional $50 million in funding. This again will be very familiar to folks. When we look at our more recent applicants, what we're seeing is that around 37% of households owe more than $5,000 in rental arrears. And we have about 54% of households that report that they have unpaid rent that they're unable to pay. There's a smaller subset of folks that report that they're able to make rent currently, but will face future hardship. And then a number that we're paying really close attention to is this 15% number for households that are reporting court involvement. They've either received a notice to quit or have a housing court docket number. When we look at some of the common reasons that folks are sharing for loss of income, this again helps us get a better picture of what the future need will be for these types of resources. Around 46% of applicants report that their employer has reduced or shut down operations. We have a smaller percentage of folks, around 12%, that report being self-employed and their income has been reduced. And then around 9% of applicants report they've experienced a loss of income due to childcare or school closures. And then when we look at the industries where applicants work, again, this has been pretty consistent over the course of the past 15 months, that predominantly applicants for the rental relief fund are working in food services, leisure, and hospitality industries. Around 23% of our applicants fall into that category, with the next being applicants who are in education and health services, and then around 6% are in gig or informal economy work. And then this is our last section, but as we think about programming and future resources, two of the pieces that we're really prioritizing are both getting the word out about these resources and helping folks through the application process, specifically completing complete applications. So we're going to do this through a variety of channels. We recently launched a pop-up program with the Boston Public Library branch, where we will be offering application assistance and OHS services on site at 2 public library branches. On Tuesdays, we'll be at the Mattapan Public Library, and on Thursdays, community grant program. And this program will be used to fund up to 10 nonprofit organizations to support application outreach and application assistance for tenants and landlords. We'll really focus on late summer, early fall for that outreach and application assistance. And for this program, we're going to be prioritizing organizations that work with communities that speak languages other than English, households with children, and Black, African American, Indigenous, and people of color households. And then lastly, just wanted to reiterate some of the ongoing work that happens in this category of outreach and engagement. So we are actively using our landlord portal and making use of mailings to proactively reach out to tenants that have received a notice to quit, as well as doing mailings to small property owners to share information about rental assistance resources. And then we have this separate bucket of work that involves doing outreach through the housing court docket. And again, proactively reaching out to households in housing court. And then starting in later this month, actually next week, the Office of Housing Stability's new office space is in very close proximity to housing court, which will allow for more in-person assistance and services. So I think that's all we have to share for this deck. I can stop sharing.
Thank you very much. We've been joined by Councillor at Large Anissa Sabi-George and Councillor at Large Michelle Wu as well. Again, for the public, after this deck, we tend to just go through the questions that the councillors have or suggestions. So I'm going to just go by order of arrival. I'll go ahead and start with Councillor Flynn, and then I believe Councillor Flaherty, Councillor Braden, Councillor Wu, Councillor Sabi-George. Councillor Flynn? Okay. All right. We'll just go to Councillor Flaherty. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, then, Councillor Braden.
Thank you. I'm just curious about the number. I think it's really important to have landlords involved in this project, in this program, and to be willing participants and allow, So I'm just wondering how successful engagement with landlords has been. You went through the deck, and I saw that, but just in terms of a qualitative assessment of how successful the landlord outreach has been.
So I'm happy to get us started, and then I might turn it over to Katie Ford, who I think is on here as well. But in terms of that qualitative dimension, I think the changes that we've seen in terms of the increase in applicants who've heard about the fund from their property owner or landlord is an indication in some ways of what we're seeing on the ground in terms of a willingness to work together, certainly for some landlords to really partner closely with their tenants to get completed applications. I think we've also benefited from the work of the landlord mediator and that mediation component that we have to really help repair some of those relationships. And we'll start to have better tracking for some of the differences between the number of households that are receiving payments directly, tenants receiving payments directly, which will be, I think, a helpful indicator for us in terms of are there roadblocks that we're experiencing with landlords that are either non-responsive or refusing to accept payment.
And then with regard to the folks who are involved with the court at this point, what's your strategy for helping those people?
Yeah, I can answer to that. We actually have a very Hi, Councillor. Thank you for the question. So we actually have a very robust court strategy. Again, from this lovely room here, I'm actually steps away from the housing court, but we actually have been since the moratorium lifted, we've been searching the docket every single day. We have a contract with Homestart. They log on to Mass Courts. They enter it into a spreadsheet. We call the tenants. We email tenants, and then we mail postcards out to tenants that have been impacted by eviction. We connect them with resources, attorneys. We tell them about their rights under the eviction moratorium, and then we definitely want them signing up for rental assistance. In addition to that, we use our landlord portal, which is the notice to quit. So we have pre-court intervention process where we ask the landlord, would you accept rental assistance whenever they upload the notice to quit to the portal? And a lot of them say yes. But even if they say no, we still connect the tenant with the resources to apply for rental assistance. And we're going to start actually tabling fiscally right outside of the housing court. And I think that will also help with landlord interaction as well, because a lot of small landlords do not know about this funding source, and that is actually a more expedient process than dealing with the state's rental relief fund.
Yeah, well, that's good to know. Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Madam Chair, that's all I have for now.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wu?
Hello. Thank you everyone for being part. Sorry, I am running in between events, but appreciated the presentation. I just wanted to get a sense, was curious.
Oh, you're on mute somehow.
Oh, sorry. In terms of where you're projecting the need to be, let's say a month, 2 months, 6 months from now, as you're seeing the size of the average request change over time, and as you're seeing different pieces change, whether it's people coming back or telling others, or concentration in different buildings or places across the city, are there any trends that you can talk about that might kind of help with a sense of projection?
Yes, certainly can start to speak to that, but I think it's also an ongoing process to really be closely looking at our data to be able to project kind of what are we anticipating in terms of the future need. I think one of the helpful pieces to start with is that currently about 20% of our newer applications have come from folks that previously received assistance last year. So paying really close attention to that number in terms of, are we seeing more new folks who have not received any assistance come into the door, or are we seeing folks that received assistance in April of last year or October last year come in for additional assistance, is something that we're paying really close attention to. Katie's point around being really proactive in looking at the notice to quit data as well as the housing core data, that also tells a story about where some of the future need will be, because we know that sometimes these things are concentrated in particular neighborhoods. So paying attention to that is something that we will continue to do. And then this industries piece has been one that we've been paying attention to throughout the process. We haven't seen much change in terms of food, services, leisure, and hospitality continue to be the industries that are most impacted by COVID, and in turn, the industries that we see most reflected in our data. But there could be shifts in that. So this is very much a data-informed, data-driven process, and that's how we're thinking about understanding what the future need will be.
Thank you. And my only other question was on the representation in terms of language access. Just the one slide, it seemed that a lot of the communities, and just in having a sense of what percentage of the population are speakers of those languages were underrepresented. Any thoughts or strategy? Does that match what you're seeing, or any strategies to kind of keep getting the word out, or especially on that front, taking down barriers?
Yes, it's a great question. I think that's one of the reasons why we're really excited about the community partner program and really prioritizing communities that speak languages other than English as part of how we're thinking about awarding those funds to different nonprofit organizations, because we know that we can make all of the materials available in all of the different languages, but there's also that outreach component that has to happen alongside of it. So that's really something that we're going to be putting even more energy and effort into over the coming weeks.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sabi-George, and Councillor Flynn has returned. So after Councillor Sabi-George, Councillor Flynn, you can go.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you everyone for the presentation. I missed some of it, so I'm sorry if I might be asking something that was represented in the slides that were presented. I am very much curious about our capacity as a city, and certainly through D&D and OHS, to fulfill the needs of our residents and fulfill the commitment that this money offers. How are we doing on staffing and help to get this work done?
Yep, so I can get us started. I think one of the things that we've learned over the course of the past year of standing this up is that there is a lot of time and labor that's involved in helping folks to go through the full application experience. So one of the things that we mentioned earlier on in the presentation is we've added part-time program assistance to help with the increased phone volume in terms of helping folks complete applications online. And then we've also been working with our partner agencies to make sure that they have the staffing and capacity that they need to actually process those applications and distribute assistance. So it's really twofold that we're thinking about what can we do in terms of staffing to help respond to the need, to help get folks to as much of a complete application as possible, so that by the time it gets to one of the partner agencies, it's a much more streamlined process. And we're trying to minimize the back and forth that can sometimes happen when we're trying to collect all of the documentation that we need.
And then, sorry, Counselor, just to add on to what Taylor was saying, one of the good things about the use of this funding, and Tim could probably add on to it as well, is that we have the ability to use some of it for administrative costs, such as technology. So we're desperately trying to update, our application and our IT process, so people don't have to call into our office as much, which kind of causes a backflow for the people who are calling for, real homelessness issues and other housing stability issues that they might be facing outside of just needing rental assistance. So we're hoping to, have a better system in place where people can check on the status of their application without having to call or email and take up staff time that way as well. So, and again, really lucky to be located across from the housing court and have a public room upstairs where people can walk in and apply that way, use an iPad or whatever and just apply, get help right here from one of our staff members at OHS.
Yeah, there, again, this could have been in the earlier part of the presentation that I missed. Are there goals around timelines and response time? So obviously making sure that we have the capacity to do this work helps speed that along. But imagine if we've got families and residents trying to access your efforts, that they're in a desperate situation. So just curious about timeline and, just want to make sure that we've got the measures in place to avoid delay and to make sure that, we're fulfilling the things that we need to do.
Sure. So one of the questions that we do ask on the application is what their housing situation is. We definitely want someone who has a current court case to be assigned to a specific vendor. So those are going to NOAA right now. They're very expedient and they're just so professional getting the money out to landlords or to tenants specifically. And so having them on board and doing the great work that they're doing has been spectacular. In addition to that, if they say that they're homeless, we will help them with housing search and we'll work with our supportive housing division to work with them on any upstream issues that they may have in order to get into stable housing as well. But it is, Taylor, if you wanted to talk a little bit about how long the process is taking.
Yeah, so we have some language in the initial communication that goes to folks after they complete an application that sets an expectation that we will review this application and assign it to a partner agency within 7 days after submission. And then the target that we're really aiming for in terms of that processing time is getting between 2 to 3 weeks from time of application is submitted to time funding is distributed. There's a lot of variation within that, kind of depending on if all of the documents are there, but that's really the timeline that we are aiming for and instituting things to help us better track if we're how close that we're getting to that 2 to 3 week period for folks.
Great. And then my last question, just again around capacity. I appreciate the work that you're all doing and that there is an opportunity to use some of these dollars for that administrative help. Are we able to turn that around quickly enough to onboard any of the help that we need, or are we using that money mostly to support partner organizations to do the onboarding offsite? So are the employees city employees, or are they working for organizations? And how quickly are we able to get those funds to them so they can add that capacity?
Yes, so with the funds that we have, we're able, it is both in some ways. So we have increased the part-time program assistants are through the city of Boston through the Department of Neighborhood Development. And then we have the funding that's allocated for the partner agencies and their staffing needs. And then the community partner program that we referenced is also a way of thinking about increasing capacity in terms of increasing the number of folks that are able to help a tenant and a landlord put together a completed application packet.
And those funds are quickly available? Sorry. to do that. So the right sizing staffing needs or meeting our staffing needs, the money is, I see Katie shaking her head. That's a good enough response for me. Councillor Edwards, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Sabi George. Councillor Flynn?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Edwards, and apologize. I had a computer glitch on my end. I heard the entire presentation, so want to say thank you to the D&D team for excellent work. I know Katie and Sheila have helped me on many cases, so as has the entire team. So I just want to say thank you. So I just wanted to ask, we had a discussion earlier on access, digital access for various people, including our seniors and persons with disabilities in the immigrant community. But how difficult, Katie, is it for us to reach members, persons with disabilities that might be struggling during the pandemic? And are we certain that our message is getting to them? And what type of extra assistance can we provide persons with disabilities that might not know about this important service?
Thank you for the question. To be honest, we probably are not doing enough to reach that community, and we should be doing more to reach that community, absolutely. So what we're doing now, again, is we're really focused on preventing evictions with the funding. And what Taylor's talking about is expanding that into the communities that are hardest hit. So one of the things that we will do with that program to go into those underserved communities is to absolutely focus on people with disabilities, so they can receive information about the application and how to receive services. Being at the libraries is one thing, but that just happens to be if you're lucky enough to have someone with a disability, go by the table at the library. So that's not going to be enough. So we're really going to rely on these partner agencies to reach out to folks with disabilities. We've also been working with the Disability Commission. Once a month, we have a Housing and Disability Commission meeting. So we talk through all these issues. So that is one other way of reaching out to them and letting them know about all the resources that are available. But it's not enough what we're doing. So we are trying to expand upon that.
Thank you, Katie, for that answer. And then my final question relates to, I represent a large community, a large immigrant community. And over the years, one of the challenges has been wage theft that I've seen in my community, but many of them are in the hospitality industry. Many of them are in working in hotels as cleaners, but many of them are immigrants as well. But what type of assistance or outreach are we providing people that may not have a traditional way of receiving a paycheck, that might be they might be undocumented? I have a lot of residents in my district that are undocumented, and I provide them the same level of basic city services as anyone else, regardless of their immigration status. But what are we doing to make sure that we're reaching everybody, especially people that that might be in very difficult economic environments and may not be may be undocumented as well?
Yes, this is such an important question. And I think we have a bit of a twofold response, because one piece is about trying to minimize the amount of documentation that we're asking for folks, that we're getting what we need, but we're not asking for something overly burdensome. So we have created a form for households that receive cash income or who aren't able to provide kind of consecutive pay stubs to show proof of income or their documented income sources. So that is something that we have readily available for folks to use that form if they have no other way of providing documentation of their income. We also do not ask questions about immigration status anywhere on our application. And again, this is an area where we really see the importance of working with other city departments, as well as other nonprofit organizations and community groups, of really being those trusted partners, trusted voices in communities, so that the message is coming from multiple different spaces and venues that this is assistance that is available for undocumented households, for folks that are working in leisure or hospitality industries, that this is a resource that is available for them.
Thank you, Taylor. And I guess my final question or comment, I represent also a large community that lives in BHA developments, especially in South Boston, Mary Ellen McCormick, West Broadway, Old Colony, West 9th Street, and then going into the south end, certainly Villa Victoria, which is not public housing per se, but West Dedham Street is, the Cathedral. Castle Square is not traditional public housing. But what are we doing to make sure that we're reaching BHA residents as well?
So we have created a rental arrears program with the Boston Housing Authority. And so we're encouraging residents of the Boston Housing Authority to be in communication with their property managers to complete an application form. So assistance is available through that route. If folks end up applying for the rental relief fund, they'll get a message that outlines that process for being in touch with their property manager to apply for that program.
So just want to clarify, that's for the public housing tenants at BHA, Counselor. So Old Colony, all those places you just mentioned, they can apply directly with their property manager. And most of their managers have reached out to them. I'm sure I know that Joel and others at BHA have been reaching out to them. Probably personally, he's probably knocked on their doors to ask them to sign up for rental relief.
No, that information is very helpful. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Taylor. And thank you, Councilor Edwards.
Thank you. Councilor Flaherty is also returned. Councilor Flaherty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I lost some audio for a little bit there, so hopefully I'm not repeating a question, but I was curious to see what the total amount, what's the total amount that has been distributed through the program so far, and what has been the average disbursement? That's my first question, two parts. Second question is what percentage of the requests are approved, and what is the most common reason for denial? It's question number two, which is two parts. And lastly, just want to know which neighborhood and or which demographic is or has been underrepresented in the application process, and what efforts are we making to ensure that these communities are including and being able to benefit from the program? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I think Taylor, who walked us through the deck, has a lot of answers to those questions. So Taylor?
Yes. So the total amount distributed to date is $15.5 million that has gone to over 2,900 households in the city of Boston. Our average payment currently is around $7,557, and that includes both rental assistance as well as utility assistance. More recently, what we've seen in terms of the difference between applications that are submitted but then not approved, we've received over 1,400 applications between March of this year to today, and 313 of those have been marked as ineligible or have not been approved. So we have a pretty low denial rate. I think the most up-to-date numbers are our denial rate is around 4.7%. And then what some of the common reasons are for ineligibility is we have about 35% of households that are report being full-time college or graduate students, or are and then the second highest reason for ineligibility is non-City of Boston residents. And then I think below that is households that are over income. And then we sometimes have households that opt for other resources instead of the city's rental relief fund. I think the last set of questions you asked was around underrepresented neighborhoods and communities.
Yes, which neighborhoods and which demographics are underrepresented, and what efforts are being made to reach those folks to make sure they're aware of the program and be able to take advantage of the benefits?
Yeah, so what we're seeing in terms of the data is that currently over 60% of the rent relief fund resources are going to communities of color, are going to households of color. And then when we look at the application distribution by neighborhood, we are seeing neighborhoods like Dorchester, East Boston, Roxbury, Hyde Park, and Mattapan being neighborhoods where the most amount of rental assistance has been distributed, and that in many ways really aligns with what we would expect to see just based on what we know about Boston's landscape in terms of rent burden households, in terms of the industries that households in those communities work in, and also thinking about our notice to quit data. One of the pieces that I think that we ended with was this community partner program, and that's really a space where we're thinking about how can we continue or really amplify outreach to communities that speak languages other than English, because I think one of the things that we see in our data is that there's room for improvement in terms of connecting with our households that speak languages other than English. That will continue to be a priority and something that we really focus on as we launch this grant program. And then as we think about the neighborhoods of impact, I think that we'll continue to see significant applications from those neighborhoods that I first mentioned of Dorchester, East Boston, Hyde Park, Mattapan, but certainly thinking about other neighborhoods across the city that we know have a large percentage of renters that are cost burdened, that work in industries that we know that have been disproportionately impacted by COVID. So that's a lens that we'll continue to bring as we think about additional outreach and the assistance that folks need to pull together completed applications.
Thank you, Taylor, and thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. And then just me, some quick follow-up questions. I did receive a question from a constituent asking about whether you're still using the third-party payment provider, Bill.com. And there has certainly been some customer service issues that have been relayed to me, my office, and there seems to be a back and forth of whose results or issues there are with that. So I'm just curious if you're aware of those issues and if you could speak to how we're going to get through those issues. That's number one. I do have an interesting dynamic where there's some landlords that own several properties and then have different, one's on Metro, one's on Project Hope, one's on, and so one landlord, but different avenues of relief. So you can tell me how that is, we're going to smooth out some of that coordination. And then finally, I can't remember if Councilor Wu or Councilor Sawi-George asked this, so I apologize if I'm repeating that. What are you seeing in terms of, is there a flattening of the requests amount? Are you seeing forever an increase in the amount of people asking for assistance? Obviously, sustainability is a concern. This at some point will not be here. What's your step down plan? And how are we going to, rents were already not sustainable before. What are we going to do when the federal aid and certain monies are no longer available? Are we going to reduce maybe the amount that we're giving out to maybe stretch the money a little further? Are we going to reduce the qualifications for what gets you aid? So, you know, I know you've done an excellent job, for example, weeding out students, for example, but are you going to, so that's a real concern about, you know, the long-term ability to maintain this. So again, 3 questions, Bill.com, landlords with multiple properties, and then, I mean, maybe you are seeing a reduction in the amount of applications, highly unlikely. I know there's a huge increase in the amount of evictions, but I am concerned about the long-term, the longevity of this program. And that's it for me.
Thank you for the questions. I am painfully aware of some of the customer service issues that have gone on with the account, especially Bill.com. That is one of our third-party vendors that has been using Bill.com. We instructed them to stop doing that. So hopefully that issue has subsided. The landlords that have multiple properties that have been assigned to various vendors. That is a glitch in the system that will be fixed as we integrate our platform onto Salesforce. Right now we're using a system called AgilePoint, which is kind of antiquated. And so we're hoping that when we move into Salesforce, we can see who's applied, who owns properties, and that we can assign people to the right vendor, especially if they've already been assigned to a vendor, because that makes the most sense. So we've had some growing pains in that respect. Again, this was originally, as we all know, a fund that we thought was going to last a few months and then, be done. We didn't RSVP to this pandemic. So,
Yeah.
right. So,
Invitation.
and we're actually having a training with the vendors on the 14th to integrate into Salesforce. So we're really hoping that will clear up some of those glitches. And then as far as the trends, we are seeing people asking for more money. The trend that's more alarming to me outside of the rent is the utility assistance that's being requested. That is also a big housing stability issue with utility shutoffs, the moratorium that just ended. The amounts of utility assistance that's being requested is it's really, people have $2,000-$3,000 bills. We can only cover $1,500 right now at this time. The state only covers $1,500. So people are having to go to multiple sources. We're helping them, as Taylor mentioned, with the environment department, get on payment plans and everything. That's a big concern to me, are the utility bills. That's kind of, I feel like, the next big problem that's going to happen. But the step down plan is, prioritizing 50% AMI people, which we're already doing, and making sure that we have upstream services available, as we always have at the Office of Housing Stability, for these folks. We want to meet this moment, just as you mentioned. We want to make sure that while we have all this money, we're not just paying people's rent off, and then a year from now they're getting evicted. So we're desperately every day trying to come up with a plan to make sure that doesn't happen. And I know that's not as specific as you would like, but that is what.
No, but just stay on that point then. So are you then requiring at least that landlords don't evict if they get a check?
They have to. They're not evicting if they get paid, but we also pay the tenant directly. But they're not required to not evict. But they have to drop the eviction case if they're paid for those arrears.
Okay.
Yeah, and paying the tenant directly has actually been really helpful with the court cases.
I believe it. Yeah. Okay.
Because a lot of landlords don't like to sign that letter. So having the ability to pay the tenant and have them do their own side agreement, and having lawyers to help them has been phenomenal.
I believe it. And your work has been phenomenal. That collectively, you for all of what you've done. But I think every single one of us, we're going to transition as a city. We're going to have a new leader this fall. We're going to have a lot of different things hitting us up. And this is something that I am genuinely concerned about how sustainable this is. We have federal government now giving us some money. At some point, that's not going to come in. And then we're back to the original, federal grants that we were always getting that never funded, direct rental relief. This is new for us.
Right.
They did to a certain extent, but not at this this capacity or this level. So I think not now, but I'd love for us to talk, like D&D to talk, and us to figure out as a city what's a step down or what's a plateau plan that we can handle. Not just into 2022, but up into 2025 or something.
Right. I agree, because I feel like we're just delaying pain. I don't want to delay pain for people. That's my big fear.
I don't either. Get the money out, but at some point the money's not coming in, and then what? You're still going to have the requests.
Right.
We, not you, us, the city, will still have the requests. We're still going to have the need, and I don't think that all of us are going to be able to say that we bounce back from this pandemic by 2022 or by whenever, 2023 even. A lot of people, our city coffers and our property rates will bounce back, but we already had income inequality. We already had people not being able to pay rent. So that's my concern. But I won't delay this conversation anymore. I do appreciate everyone coming, and unless any counselors want to raise their hands with some burning questions, I'll tell you, my intent has always been the same, to move this money as soon as possible out to DND so that they can proceed to get it out to the people of Boston. So any raise your hands if you have any questions or burning. Oh, okay. I see you, Councilor Flynn. I meant your electronic hand, but go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Lydia. So I wanted to ask Katie, certainly it takes every city department to be engaged in this effort. I think one of the biggest, one of the departments I was most proud of during this pandemic was Office of Food Access. But I mentioned that to you because are you working with an organization or department, I should say, such as Food Access, knowing that if someone needs rent assistance, they also probably need food assistance as well?
Yeah, absolutely. We are partnered with the Office of Food Access. We put flyers in all the food bags. We plan, when we're back with the public on the 12th, we plan on having a presence at these food locations. And yeah, 100% all in with food access. We knew before the pandemic that is where if people start not paying rent, it's because they're also having trouble not paying other bills. And so food is one of those things. And when anyone calls our hotline, we also ask them, do you need assistance paying food? We also are tracking through the application if people are on SNAP benefits. If they're not, just based on their income that we've calculated through their application, we have Food Access contact them to sign them up for those benefits.
That's excellent. Thank you, Katie. I have no further questions. Thank you, Councilor Edwards.
Thank you all very much. With that, I'm going to close out today's hearing. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you.